Okay, this camera quality is quite bad. It's my laptop's webcam, but I wanted to make this video for a few reasons, which I'll explain later. It's a bit of an uncomfortable video to make because a lot of the sort of injustices that have really been exposed as a result of what's been happening recently have been things that I, for one, have been sort of largely shielded from, I guess, due to my sort of social position, and my race has an awful lot to do with that. So this is an issue that I haven't been particularly as vocal about as I would have liked, because I've had to take a bit of time away from sort of mainstream social media like Instagram and Twitter, because it was starting to negatively impact my mental health for various reasons. It's a pretty intense place. I feel as though I have done stuff to further this cause. It's not like I haven't done anything. I've signed petitions and I've raised money, and I encourage everybody watching this to do so, and there are lots of links all over the place that will help you do that. But what I didn't want to do was give the impression I was staying silent. But that's all I'm going to say about it. I don't want this to turn into me talking about what I've done and what I haven't done and what I'm saying. This video is not about me, and none of this is about me. Okay, I think that lighting's a bit better. Anyway, yeah, so this isn't about me, this isn't about what I've been doing. It goes without saying that my support is with the black community and any communities of oppressed minorities. What I wanted to do with this video is, considering that, you know, I know people who do watch these videos, I'm not just putting them out to absolutely nobody. There are at least like 5 people who watch these, is kind of address some potential productive steps forward, in particular because when things happen, this wave of protests obviously have their roots very deeply in the oppressed minorities of America, but it started off with the killing of George Floyd this time round. That was what kind of sparked the international awareness of it. And a lot of time when things like that happen in America, it is, gosh, this is really bad. Okay, I think I found a good balance now, because, yeah. Anyway, it's very easy when these types of things happen in America. It's very easy, particularly in the case of school shootings. A lot of the time, we in the UK tend to go, well, that's really horrible. Thank goodness it doesn't happen to us. And there was a sort of, that happens every time round. But unfortunately, in this case, it doesn't. Now, obviously, our police, our normal police officers, don't carry guns or firearms, and that is a very good thing, and that's something that I personally think is a better step than what's happened in America. And police brutality is not as large of a problem, by and large, as it is in America. However, I think for us to take the same approach as we usually do and say, thank goodness it's not a problem here, is kind of quite ignorant, because it really is a problem here, and I think a lot of people have seen it be a problem, but it hasn't really sort of come to fruition or captured the public attention in such a way. So what we need to do is we need to think about, particularly in this country, because a lot of the issues in America are not things that I feel particularly qualified to talk about this time around. You'll hear me talk a lot about America, but I think this time around I want to focus on this country. I want to focus on what I really want is to build a society where we can say that type of thing doesn't happen here. And this is because I think in this country there is a good sense of community in at least in the places where I've lived. I felt a sort of sense of community, and we have a sort of level of Britishness that everybody in this country shares, irrespective of race. But that does not mean that things can sometimes, injustices can divide along racial lines, and it's a big shame, and it's something that desperately needs to change. And I think we've kind of ignored it in this country for a while, because it's seen as being, the problems in this country is seen as being not as bad as the problems in America. But it doesn't matter if they're not as bad, if they are still bad and they're still affecting people and still making people feel like they have less of a place in society because of their race, or feel like they're not equal. Then as long as that's happening, there's always going to be a problem. And so there are always steps that need to be taken in order to sort this out. So the first issue is our own police force, which is definitely not perfect. And I think one of the things that could help would be an inquiry into essentially the culture of the police force. Being a relatively small country, I think we can be thankful that we do have the power to essentially say we need a massive investigation into police brutality and racism and racial discrimination in the police force, because ultimately the police are law enforcement, and they are meant to enforce the law that protects the civilians, and if they're not doing that in the right way, then there's a problem. So I think an investigation, an inquiry into the facts about police brutality and racism in the UK is something that would be very helpful, and then we can go from there at figuring out ways of how to better that. There's been a lot of things recently about police training levels, and I think one of the things that signals the difference in the police force in the US compared to some European countries is the level of training that they get. In a lot of countries, it's mandatory to get a degree, a 3-year degree at least, to become a member of the police force, and extensive training. And I think that is a standard that definitely needs to be upheld in this country as well, because whilst it should be perfectly reasonable that anybody could be able to become a police officer, and in fact it is probably more important now than ever before that we ensure that law enforcement is something that people feel like is a good career to go into, is a good, fair and just career to go into. But we need to uphold a very high and rigorous standard to make sure that police are fully prepared. They know exactly what to do. They can cope in all sorts of difficult situations and not very nice situations, and they should be expected to be able to cope in those situations without making an irrational move or acting in a way that later is very clearly the wrong thing to do. And so there is a lot of reform in the police system that needs to take place, and the way we start with that is an inquiry into exactly where this is happening. Secondly is the fact that the UK is not innocent now and never has been innocent, and in fact, unfortunately, a lot of the problems, a lot of the systematic racism that has been in place in America actually culturally came from this country and the British Empire. Now, when I was at school in year 8 history, I was quite lucky that we were given an insight into the British Empire and how we behaved then, and there was a lot about the slave trade, and it wasn't particularly very nice stuff, but it's important to learn about. And I think a lot of people in this country are not fully aware. We know what the British Empire is, and there's a general consensus that it wasn't particularly very nice, but for a lot of people who aren't fully educated about facts, that's where it stops. And I think that part of British history is not a very nice part of the British history, but then again, you know, the Holocaust is not a nice part of German history and not a nice part of the world history, and we learn about all the awful things that happened in communist Russia and in Nazi Germany. So I think it's only fair that we are educated in the same way about our own country. And I think it's not unpatriotic to acknowledge all of the mistakes that were made. I think quite the opposite, actually. The thing to do if you really... The thing to do if you really care about this country and the direction that it's going is to educate the young about all of the mistakes that were made and ensure that everybody goes into this society, particularly the politicians and the lawmakers and the people high up. Everybody goes into society with that idea in the background about how systematic racism and oppression was built from the British Empire, and that is something, whilst not very nice, everybody should know about in the same way that everybody knows about the Holocaust. And you know, it's just a very important thing, and I think it needs to happen. Additionally, this could go hand in hand with modern day discrimination, because I think it would also be fair to be taught about modern day discrimination in more detail, and that can extend further from racial oppression to oppression of females, about how it was only really very recently that, you know, feminism became a mainstream idea, and how we still have quite a long way to go, and what some of the misconceptions are about the problems in all aspects, whether it is sexist, whether it is homophobic, and whether it is most prevalently racism in this country. And that could help with a lot of other things as well, is including that in an expanded citizenship program in schools. We were given citizenship lessons once a fortnight, and PSHE lessons also once a fortnight in certain years. Whilst I'm grateful that we had those lessons, I don't think it was enough, and I think that the exam mentality prevents more of these lessons from taking place. It's also important to know, aside from oppression, you know, was anybody taught how to do their tax returns in school? Was anybody taught about buying houses and what mortgages are, and about even really the basics of student loans and things like that? No. And I think the exam mentality of education in this country prevents people from learning about other things that are equally as important. You know, whilst it's really important to have basic qualifications in the subjects that matter and more extensive qualifications in the subjects that you want to pursue a career in, equally as important, in my opinion, is just an awareness of society. And perhaps a lot of the reason why politicians, etc., certain politicians are deemed so out of touch is because of that background of academia and being sent to a good school that has amazing exam results and then going to a really posh university and then getting a job really high up in whatever sector, and you're not really taught any degree of social awareness. So that's another important thing. So I think that's pretty much it. I don't particularly feel like starting any debates where debates are already happening, partly because I don't feel particularly qualified to talk about it, and partly because I don't feel like I've got anything new to add anyway. But I wanted to raise some ideas about systematically how do we go forward and how do we reconstruct society in a way that works for everybody. And obviously that's something I've been fighting for the whole time I've been active in politics, and always coming up with ideas, but I think these ideas are quite relevant now, and I thought it might be worth discussing them at this time and raising awareness of them at this time. This was a bit of a rush together video, but I've been feeling for a very long time now that I wanted to make this because I didn't really feel like anybody was talking about it enough. So yes, apologies for the poor quality. My phone that I usually record videos on is having some storage issues, so I thought I'd record it directly onto my webcam, and pretty much in one take. So yes, let me know what you think about what I've discussed. Let me know what you think is right, and let me know what you think I've got wrong. I think in these types of debates it's always important to learn and grow. In any type of debate, it's important that people say, listen, that's not right, and then for somebody else to go, oh, okay, right, learning. It's a very important thing to be able to be told that you're wrong, and to kind of be willing to re-educate yourself on these types of things. And it's very important for us to recognise that a society that we've been fairly complacent in, particularly for me as a white male, that society is really quite rotten in a lot of places, and it needs to be overhauled massively. So yes, that is pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching, and yeah, I'll make a video soon about some other things.